Good evening, gentlemen and people on Zoomed on. I call this board workshop to order. It is 5:35. Let me call roll, even though we don't need a quorum. Mr. Kennedy?
I'm here.
Dr. Jaime?
I'm here.
Is Dr. Jaime present?
I'm here.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Here.
Dr. Rivera?
Here.
Mr. Lopez?
I'm here.
Here.
And myself, Mr. Nieto. Did Dr. Jaime, is Dr. Jaime on? All right, item number 2, public comments. We don't have any public comments today. Item 3, Texas Education Agency requirements for extension of the 2020-21 school year, transition beyond the 4-week limit. Dr. Canales.
Good afternoon, Board of Trustees, and everybody joining this Zoom workshop today. Did want to provide information on the requirements by the Texas Education Agency after the 4-week initial transition period for this school year. So allow me to pull up the presentation. Mr. Neville, can you see that, the presentation? So this is information only. We're not presenting a plan today, and we're not asking for our Board of Trustees to take any action. So this is just, what is TA allowing school districts to do? Well, first of all, TA is allowing school districts with board approval, so it requires board action, to consider a waiver to extend the initial 4-week transition by another additional 4 weeks. Again, this will require board action to authorize administration to submit this waiver to the Texas Education Agency. Our Texas Education Agency does stipulate requirements for districts to follow during the planning process and in the waiver prior to board action and district submission to the Texas Education Agency. So I'm just covering the basics. What is the requirement by our Texas Education Agency? Our district is committed to continue educating our children in the safest possible way. We want to create pandemic resilient teaching and learning spaces for all. So this is what the request to extend the start of the 2020-2021 school year, transition beyond the 4-week limit. So the Education Agency began the school year, allowed us to begin the school year with a limit of 4 weeks. That provided a remote education and also time for districts to plan. So this is a request, and I do have the TA requirements on the next slide. They're in this section where it says Section 1 requirements, but I'm going to go ahead and just pull some of those out so that we all know what they are. So first of all, one of the requirements is our district has to indicate on this waiver the public health conditions that warrant a faster end to the transition period. Now, TA is allowing for 4 additional weeks, but is asking us under what conditions, when it comes to public health, will Weslaco ISD determine that we can faster end the 4 weeks? In other words, come back perhaps after 2 of those 4 additional weeks or 3. TA is saying that districts should, before submitting the waiver, consult, share their plan with teachers, staff, and parents. And that districts must communicate to families the procedures used to limit access to on-campus attendance during those 4 extra weeks, which would be weeks 5, 6, 7, and 8 of our school year. So during the transition period, districts are still required. So during the additional 4 weeks, weeks 5 through 8, districts are still required to allow all students without internet or devices, access to on-campus instruction. TA is looking at this as a transition plan where we start slow and we bring a small groups of students back on week 5. and we run our plans, and we get our students and our staff acclimated to those plans, and then we build week 6 and possibly add more students week 6, and then more students week 7, and so forth week 8. So by week 9, every parent who chooses to send their child for on-campus face-to-face instruction is able to do so by week 9. Our parents do have a choice, and TA has not swayed from that, to determine whether they want their children to continue with remote education from home, or if they want to send their children to schools. So beginning week 5 for us, which is September the 28th, 2020, we must provide at least some on-campus instruction that week and have our plan in order to run for the next 4 weeks. There's multiple steps in developing this phased-in reopening plan. There's TA requirements, and there's lots and lots of documents on the TA website. And then there's specific documents that talk about the requirements. I mentioned some earlier in this presentation. The second step is we have to determine the populations to offer on-campus instruction first. So the key question for us is, among our students, who will benefit for coming back first? In other words, in week 5, and so forth all the way up to week 8 until we open it up to all by parent choice. A third requirement is we have to assess the capacity of our campuses giving the health guidelines, and those haven't changed. It's still 6 feet between students, or 45 square feet around students in a classroom, which means you can't have classrooms of 22 students or 30 students. Another step in the process I mentioned is surveying families and collecting data. We have some surveys. We thank our parents. We had over 16,600 parents who registered and who answered some key questions for us about preferences for on-campus versus remote versus hybrid. We are required to ask our parents again. So we will be asking our parents again about their preferences for the children when it comes to on-campus, remote, and the possibility of hybrid by parent choice. As a school district, TA is allowing us to offer hybrid for high school students, but parents can also opt for some type of hybrid. However, we must offer instruction every single day for students in grades, I believe it's grades 3 to 8th grade, who parents choose that. Again, in 5, we go back to evaluate the capacity alignment after the survey to see if we have room for everybody, to determine again who can come in first during that 5th week all the way to the 8th week. And that's part of the determine the phasing timeline and the criteria that jumps to 6. And then in step 7, we communicate the plan with our stakeholders. Texas Education Agency Regis recently came out with some more information on September the 3rd, which was just last Thursday. The team and I are committed to those Commissioner Morath's meetings, who leads the Texas Education Agency. His next meeting is tomorrow. So we'll be tuning into that. There have been changes from Texas Education Agency as our state experiences the impact of COVID-19, and we will keep you posted on that. So TA also gives us examples of how to progress through a phased-in reopening. They talk about, choosing and phasing in students in predetermined weeks, and they give us examples. And these are just examples for districts to consider. And they really, really state that it's important to start small and transition, so we develop those habits that we know that the CDC and other health authorities are telling us that we all need to be embracing, such as wearing the mask, social distancing, washing our hands frequently. So it's important that as we phase in, that we develop those habits in children and in all our staff, so we keep each other as safe as possible. And again, by week 5, which is September 28, 2020, the end of this month, we must phase in a group of students. TA also has resources to help districts determine, well, who are you going to consider? Who's going to come back first? Who should you consider and why? Which is what we're working on right now. And they make suggestions like you might want to consider students lacking technology access. However, they do note, and there's a note on here, that districts, LEAs or school districts, are still required to allow all students to access on-campus instruction who come from households without internet access or appropriate remote learning devices. And while our district and our Board of Trustees, we thank you for that, we have done due diligence to have hotspots and devices. If there comes a time when our students can't access it, we need to, week 5, have our campuses open for our students to do that. Young learners is another consideration who may not be able to effectively participate in remote learning at home and whose parents may need childcare services to work. They may be part of the first response teams, essential workers, so that's a consideration. Special education is another consideration TA asks districts to consider. So that we effectively deliver services outlined in IEPs and 504 plans. And that some of the students may be better served on campus, via in-person services than remote. Other populations to consider include English language learners or at risk who may be behind and have gaps in learning, transition years, kindergarten, 6th grade, students new to middle schools, and 9th graders, students new to high schools, were part of the considerations. And then students need an additional academic support. Again, it hits close to at-risk students who maybe have wider performance gaps, or they worsened during the spring semester when we quickly shifted into remote learning. So TA just notes that this is not an exhaustive list of student populations for districts to consider, but I did want to provide some examples to you, Board of Trustees, about some of the considerations. So that concludes the presentation on what TEA's requirements for the extension for the 2020 school year transition beyond the initial 4-week limit, which ends on September 28th. That would be our 5th week. And again, Board of Trustees, TA defines the parameters. There's some things that are not your choice, and they're not even administration's choice. We have to work together to create the best possible plan to create spaces, resilient spaces, so that we're ready by week 9 for our parents to send children back to schools if they choose.
Okay, at this time, thank you, Dr. Canales. I'll entertain some questions. I'll begin with Mr. Kennedy. Any particular questions with the plan, Mr. Kennedy?
I have a couple of questions. The first is there any way that we can do this extension without having students come onto campus?
I don't know if, am I muted or not? Can y'all hear me? I'm good. So according to with these requirements, we do have to offer on-campus instruction to students on that 5th week who are having connectivity issues or device issues. And TA has recommended a small groups of students so that we phase in, so we transition, so that we acclimate, we develop the habits, and then we build. So at this point, Board of Trustees, the way we understand it, you don't have a choice, and neither does administration, about continuing completely remote for week 5 through 8.
How are other districts? I mean, I guess they've announced that they're not going to do it. I guess bring kids back. How are they doing that? And what are the consequences of that?
Other districts are bringing back different. There's some districts that we've talked to that may be smaller than we are, that they're not even submitting the plan for an extra 4 weeks. There are others that have worked with their teams and have developed, I think one that I heard of today, they're opening up week 5 to anybody who wants to come back. And then also special needs populations because of the needs of some of the students in the district. And then like the 2nd week, they're opening it up to transition grade levels and just building on there. There are some districts who may have to, and it's a good, really good question, because we received an email from our service center, Region 1, the email was sent through our service center from Texas Education Agency. That what they shared with us is that there was some confusion in Region 1 that districts still had a choice not to offer some on-campus instruction during that second 4-week transition. And where they clarified for us that we don't have the option. You know, we do have to offer on-campus instruction beginning the 5th week. So there's some districts who may have approved the transition plan thinking that there could be remotely that may have to be reworking it. But then again, Mr. Kennedy, you know, I am going to share that we meet with the commissioner every Thursday, and he clarifies things for us, and they update documents based upon questions. And in our local health authorities look at the data in terms of the number of cases. So we're in week 2. By week 5, we have to be ready. We also have to watch the data very, very carefully, but still work within the parameters of the Texas Education Agency. Because what the agency is tying this to is funding to educate our children.
What about the teach? So if we have to allow students to come back on week 5, how will we select the staff that will work with the students? So that'd be a kind of volunteer basis, or have you ever thought of that so far?
That's a really, really good question. We're working on that this week. Tomorrow, we've been doing some legwork, and I want to thank, you know, our principals and Mrs. Peterson and Mr. Aguilar and cabinet. We've been doing some legwork on that. Tomorrow, we have our first meeting to get feedback from some principal teams who've been working on this. And then we have to work through that and have that ready to go before we come to you to seek the approval to submit, if the board chooses, the waiver to the Texas Education Agency. So the possibilities are everything from everybody back on that first week, so we can also get used to, you know, the habits and all that in the space, to phasing it in like you're suggesting, to if we determine which students come in, which teachers also come in, it could, you know, and volunteer, you know, like you mentioned. So we're going to work on that, you know, with the highest regard for our staff and our students this week. You know, knowing that we all, you know, in education have a tremendous responsibility to make sure that our children continue to learn and thrive so that they're ready not only for the next grade level, but they're ready to one day graduate and move forward and lead successful, productive lives. So there's a lot on the shoulders of educators right now, because all of us are committed to that. We're trying to figure out the best, safest, with no guarantees, way to do that.
Mr. Kennedy, any other questions at this time?
I do have some other questions, but I'll let everyone ask questions.
Okay. Dr. Rivera?
Yes, I guess just one question. If on week 5, when the kids can come back, the survey shows of your approximately 18,000 students district-wide, how many parents chose to come back face-to-face by that time? Approximately how many?
From the, I missed part of your, I couldn't, my
Okay,
computer.
of all your
Dr. Rivera,
students,
I didn't hear the first question.
all
The
your
first part of
students,
it.
all your students district-wide, how many
Mhm.
parents want to come back by the 5th week?
So,
But how many approximately?
yeah, we're going to do that survey again, sir, this week. What we do have is we have the data from the registration where we ask the questions. So the 16,682, we have about 1,500 parents who at that time did indicated they wanted on-campus instruction. We had about another, I want to say 4,500. Staff can check the numbers for me, and I can, you know, and can correct me. About another 4,500 who wanted a hybrid. And some of those who wanted the hybrid, which is go to school some days and do remote some days, were from the high school. So what we need to do again is resurvey our parents, and hopefully we'll get the same response so that we can use that information to plan the rest of the transition.
Okay, and my second question, what about staff? Is there a survey for staff to see how many of them want to come back?
We have to get staff input too, so we can consider a survey for staff. When we did survey staff the first round, we did have some staff say, you know, we want to be on campus. You know, I'm going to, you know, for the subject that I teach or the grade that I teach, you know, or the technology that I use or the other resources I use to teach, I prefer to be in my classroom. So, we can also, resurvey staff as well.
Staff, you mean teachers or anyone else? Librarians, counselors?
Right, it would be teachers. We have to be ready for the on-campus for some groups of students, a small group of students on week 5. So, the fact is, on week 5, if nothing changes from the agency, we will have to be ready to provide instruction to the students who don't have connectivity or something happens with their devices, and a small group of students that we come up with to bring back week 5. Week 6, we'll have more students.
So your staffing will depend then on how many parents want to send their kids to school by week 5?
Yes,
Your teachers and staff.
Yes, it could. That's going to be part of it. The other part can be about the programs that we offer the students. So that's what we're going to spend our time, Dr. Rivera, this week, working out all those details, so that we work through them and we have the rationale and we know how to move forward in the safest way possible for staff who has to come back and the students who are going to be coming back weeks 5 through 8.
I think very important too is that when the parents send their kids back, staff has to be very, very clear on their role is to make sure that the schools are ready, they're clean, sanitized, and the parents feel safe taking their kids back to school. So I think the role is going to be their staff. It's going to have to go out there and really get with it and have those schools clean, spick and span.
It's a good point, a very good point, Dr. Rivera. Mr. Oscar Real has been, his team, Martin and everybody have been working really, really hard and disinfecting and cleaning. And, we have some ideas when our teachers, do come back. We plan to provide all the safeguards possible and even commitments. And we know with commitment comes accountability, that we are regularly cleaning and disinfecting our facilities, because we do want them to be resilient, pandemic resilient teaching and learning spaces. So it's a very, very good point.
Okay. No more questions, Mr. Nieto?
All right, thank you, Dr. Rivera. Mr. Gonzalez, any questions this time? Is Mr. Gonzalez on? Dr. Jaime, any questions this time, Dr. Jaime?
Can you hear me, Coach? Yes, Dr. Canales, question regarding safety plans and transportation plans and cafeteria plans. Are we going to make that information available before, say, another survey goes out? I know a lot of parents are probably going to want to know that information before they commit to, yes, no. How does that look?
We do have several of those things in place. Dr. Rodriguez, it's a good point. We will, definitely consider looking at a user-friendly way to put that information out. Everybody from Mr. De La Rosa to Ms. Segura to Mr. Riojas to Ms. Peterson, Mr. Aguilar, just everybody has been involved in looking at those things. Ms. Kaufman, just everybody. We do have the public health guidelines for the Texas Education Agency. When it comes to our schools, we have back to work plans. We have back to school plans. So we will definitely, huddle tomorrow and figure out how to take all that information. It's a lot, or maybe even just the best way to provide it and still consider a user-friendly way for our parents, because you make a good point. I think they will want to know, how do we know that, what's going to be happening? That it is going to be a clean, disinfected place for our children to go to.
Correct.
So thank you for offering that, Dr. Rodriguez.
Now, Dr. Canales, one more question. What about so we're definitely, it's going to be a small group of students. Now, are we still planning on transitioning all teachers to campus at the same time, or is that going to be a transition for them also? What's the plan there?
That's the big question. Our students and our staff, those are big questions. We're meeting this week and we'll continue to look at everything, including the programs and the quality and of the programs and where we are to determine that. By week 9, every child, every parent who chooses to send their child to school needs to have a classroom, place to go. So we're working on those deals this week. So I'm not ready to make and share this is exactly what it's going to be. But everything will be considered from all back to back and faces to, I think it was Mr. Kennedy mentioned about volunteers. Have you looked for volunteers? Dr. Rivera mentioned, have you surveyed the teachers and talked to the teachers? So we're going to work through that. Our first meeting is tomorrow. We've already had one meeting this week on it. In our meeting to get some initial just layers of information is tomorrow. So we'll be ready to share that shortly. Right now, our objective as a team was to make sure that we put the basics out there about what is TA requiring, what's in the plan, the planning requirements.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you, Doc.
All right, thank you, Dr. Jaime. Good question, both of you. Coach Cuellar, any questions this time? Unmute yourself, Coach Cuellar.
Think it'd be a good idea to unmute, huh?
All the time.
Everything has been addressed pretty much in terms of, choice, because I think it's so important for that. I like the idea that we're going to transition very slowly because we don't want to have too many people start off right off the bat, and then we start getting situations where people are infected, and now we have to quarantine mass numbers versus smaller numbers. Number one. But a big concern I have is once this transition begins, students will be brought to school obviously by bus, I guess, and by parents.
Yes, sir.
How are we going to accept these students coming to each campus, and where are we going to keep them in a situation where the social distancing will be, enforced, and making sure that sanitation practices are going to be, enforced to the fullest? Because I see a very, very, very strong, big challenge, in trying to do that, especially with younger students. So my biggest concern is how are we going to do that and ensure safety?
That's understandable. Part of the planning to come back is, how we navigate the arrivals and the dismissals. Our transportation department already has been trained and even has a video out that we'll be sharing in the near future that shows what's going to happen between the routes to campus. So all those details will have to be worked out. Our custodial staff has been trained, and we'll have to finalize that. It's not just when you arrive, is, when we do have by that week 9, more students back, for children that aren't self-contained, that'll stay with the same teacher all day. In middle schools and high schools, how do you navigate? And even elementaries, how do you navigate the building when you come in? I saw pictures today of one of our elementaries where they already have the markers. This is 6 feet apart. Here's where you stand. Here are the markers. And they have the signs, on the floors. This is the way you navigate our elementary campus now. So, and that's the purpose of the transition, to start small, get children acclimated, and then add more. So that, again, by week 9, we're ready for any parent who chooses. And the parents will have to notify us 2 weeks, 2 weeks, they'll have to notify us we're coming back. That's why we're doing that extra survey. We want to come back on campus so that we know about how many numbers we'll have even at week 9, when we say, okay, now it's open to all the parents who said they wanted to bring their children back. The good points.
One more question. Who will be allowed to go to campuses? I mean, like during the day, if a parent shows up, how are we going to deal with that? And what restrictions are you going to have on those parents? What can and can they not bring to school with them?
Well, we're gonna finish those details, but just to answer it generally, we want to minimize the number of visitors to the campus. You know, we still want to be available and be, to our parents and to others. We want to minimize the number of visitors. You know, we'll have to talk, primarily with our elementary principals on, okay, what are we going to allow? Because, some great things about our school systems is there are certain milestones, even within the grade levels. The first time you take your child to a campus, as a pre-K or kindergarten student, part of that tradition is, I take a picture in front of the school, my child's first day of school in Weslaco ISD ever. So we'll have to work out those types of details out with our elementary principals. But in the end, it's not that we don't want parents, in terms of visiting our campuses and being part of our goal is parent partnerships. But we're going to have to limit, and come up with those guidelines to limit visitors to campuses. And that includes me. I love, so many of the staff members who are not on campuses, going to campuses and seeing the wonderful work of our teachers and our principals and our custodials and our cafeteria workers. We're going to have to limit, our presence on campuses for a while. So those are good questions, Mr. Cuellar, and things that we will be working on and have those details as we continue with this week and next week in planning.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Is Mr. Gonzalez on or Mo, Mr. Lopez?
Yeah, Coach, I'm on. Can y'all hear me now?
Yes, sir. Any questions, Mr. Gonzalez?
I think the rest of the board members have pretty much, gotten to the core of what we need to know from TEA. I just think it's really important that our parents and our staff know that, one, we're not forcing them back. It's just the guideline that we have to follow by the state. And secondly, that we as a district are going to do our best to have a safe, clean environment for our staff and for our students. But overall, I think it's been great information, great questions by the rest of the board members. Let's get those surveys out so that we can prepare better, and so that when week 5 comes around, we're ready to get the ball rolling.
Good point there by Mr. Gonzalez. Several points there, actually, and of course the other board members. And just a reminder that parents do have a choice to keep it remotely at home by that time too. So, Mr. Mo Lopez, is he available or not?
Yes, he is.
All right, Mr. Lopez, any questions?
Yes, Dr. Canales.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. You said that we're going to start week 5, small numbers, possibly. When you say small numbers, what are you talking about? How many students? I believe our ADA is somewhere around 15,000. So what would be the small numbers that you're going to allow or bring in the first time we open back up?
Mr. Lopez, we don't have those numbers right now. We will be planning to determine it. Like, for example, TA gave us some considerations. Everything from children involved in those transition years, children new to 6th grade, new middle school, new to high school, special needs students, ESL, English language learners. So we'd have to determine the essential question for us, is among all our students, we all agree, look at our wonderful goals and our vision, our mission, that everybody deserves a well-rounded, complete education. And we're doing great things when it comes to remote learning. However, parents need to be given the choice to come on campus. So when the essential question for us is, of all our student groups, all those considerations TA said, who will benefit the most from coming back first in terms of the 5th week? And then that will determine the number. So when we collect that survey information for parents, we'll have a little bit more data to work with to determine, okay, what is small? We do want the inputs from the principals, and they get input from their staffs to determine, okay, what is small? Small at an elementary may be a different number than what it may be at a high school. So we're going to work through all those details this week. So let's just say, and then we want to phase it in. We truly want it to be a transition so that we're ready and it's not too small that by week 9, oh my goodness, we have so many more students coming back and we were too small in transitioning through those phases for the 9th week. I don't have an exact number right now. But
Right.
we're working on it. Yes, sir. We'll be working on it.
You can update the board whenever you come up with some numbers, that'd be great. Now, the other question is this, of all our teaching staff, how many do you have that number of how many are teaching from school?
We do not right now. I do not have it right now. I can tell you that I'm not going on campus because they're not supposed to on campus. I just went a few times, but when I drive by our schools, there are a lot of cars in some of the parking lots. So I don't have the number by campus. I don't have it right now, but we can probably get it from our principals.
Do you have somebody gathering that information?
No, but I think somebody probably right now is probably gathering it. We'll gather it, Mr. Lopez.
If you can
I'm sorry, Mr. Lopez.
I think it's very important as you start to open up for us to know, for staff to know, for your board, your directors to know how many teachers are out there working already from school. And I don't know, I could be wrong, but I have the feeling that more and more are coming on board as they get either frustrated, tired, bored, or something from being at home. But I could be wrong. But I think the number of teachers that are working from school is very important information for you to have and for the board to have.
Yeah, I agree. We can get those numbers. Now, we did give our teachers a choice, even during remote, that they could come to their classrooms and lead the remote learning from the classrooms. So we can work on that, Mr. Lopes, and get that. It's good. It would be good information for us to look at and have, and of course we'll share it.
Also, Dr. A little while ago, everybody and I share the same concerns as far as health and safety. We need to make sure that you guys are working on that air quality that we talked about at our last board meeting, and that some information is being gathered. Some people have heard that I am very interested in that, and they're trying to talk to me, and I'm telling talk to administration. And there is absolutely no reason, no excuse that this board, or at least that I will accept, that no, we haven't done it, we're working on it, it's coming, because that's coming means it's not going to happen while our students are out of class. It needs to happen now. The sooner the better, because right now there's no kids in school, and all of that equipment or whatever it takes to install can be working by the time our kids show up. So that needs to happen.
Okay.
I guess we can talk some more in a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, we do have on it's on the superintendent's report for the board meeting on Monday, the research and the information.
Okay.
And you had a good point there, Mr. Lopez. Yes, more teachers want to work from campus. That's very true. I've seen quite a number of cars as I pass Margo in the morning. Quite a number of people are working from campus, and we'll have to work through those. All right, Mr. Kennedy, you had another question or so?
Yes, thank you. I had a couple of statements I wanted to make. The first is I want to build off of what Dr. Iveta mentioned earlier, is that this virus puts everybody at risk. And I would urge the administration to let even non-teaching staff participate in the survey, from counselors, nurses, instructional facilitators, anyone who, everyone's life is on the line equally. So I think it's important to at least let them be heard and let them express their concerns to the administration. So that's one thing. The second thing that I want to point out is I think there's a lot of teachers, I want to express that a lot of teachers have reached out that they're worried, they're nervous about this reopening, and that's completely understandable. And I don't agree that the state should be forcing us to take students back or lose our state funding, which is without our state funding, our district collapses. Financially speaking, we can't do it. And I think there's anybody watching tonight and you disagree with what TEA is forcing your districts to do, tomorrow you need to get on the phone and call Governor Abbott's office, call our state representative, call our Eddie Lucio, our senator, and express your concerns, because they're the ones who have the direct influence over TEA. And maybe we can make a difference that way.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. I know Mr. Lopez had another question. Mr. Lopez?
And you have your principals, and I don't know, maybe this is already getting done, to gather an ongoing log of calls that come in of parents that want their kids back at school, so that you can and the board can have that information and help us planning for the future. You know, there's a certain, from one school that I'm very familiar with that is receiving calls about hurry up and open up, get the kids back in there. I'm not saying that all schools and all parents are calling, but it would be nice to know what our parents are thinking and saying. And I know that survey goes hand in hand with that, but I think a daily log of how many calls are coming in as to when are you opening up for our kids. I know it's a hardship, like I stated before, or teaching from home and learning at home. And I think some of the mindsets might have changed. I know that the coronavirus is still here and strong and everything. And I know that comes into play above all. Yet I know that we need to consider the parents' feelings as if they want to bring their kids back to school. So if you can do that.
Mr. Nieto, one last question from me.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Can we come up as a district with a plan? And hopefully it won't happen. But what's going to happen if someone tests positive, either staff or students? You know, come up with a plan of what the procedures will be if that should happen.
And I know CDC has guidelines, and the commissioner also has provided guidelines for that. And I know, Dr. Canales, you and your team will be working on that. You know what? A lot of good questions today that we have to go forward, and a lot of concerns. But I know that I'm confident that Dr. Canales and her team will work in the best interest of our students and staff for WISD. Dr. Canales, continue.
So that concludes the presentation on the transition, the extension for additional 4 weeks.
Okay. Any other pending questions? Last minute question before we go to the next item.
Yes.
Okay, Coach Correa?
The key word here is transition. And transition is something that's going to be, you know, take step at a time, and make it very, very clear to everyone that nobody's being forced to do anything. It's something that we're looking at, that we really don't have much of a choice in what but we're going to do it cautiously, with not compromising, you know, the safety of anyone. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest things, because if we're gonna have trust through this whole process, we need to have trust. You know, we're not going to shove anything down anybody's throat. Everything's going to be done very, very, very carefully, very cautiously, because I know that it's going to be very hard for you know, let's say teachers, for example, that have children who don't want them to be in school, and they're going to be at a campus worrying about what the kids are doing back at home. You know, these are the things that we're looking at, and I know that everyone's thinking about that, but you know, this word transition means transition, and we're going to follow that to a T.
Let me repeat again.
Good comments there again. Doing a transition correctly. Dr. Rivera?
Yeah, let me repeat again. So important to keep our schools clean, not only once a day, several times a day. And that's very, very important. Your mask, your social distancing, just again, keep our schools spick and span. That's the observation.
Thank you, Dr. Rivera. If not, any final questions, or I'll go to the next item. All right, Dr. Canales, voluntary insurance products and 457 plan.
Yes, Board of Trustees, we have some information to share about some products that perhaps some of our staff has been asking about that include not only voluntary insurance, but also 457 plan. And we do have Mr. Roger Garza here to provide information on both those items. So, Mr. Garza.
Thank you, Dr. Canales. Good evening, and good evening, Board President Nieto and members of the Board of Trustees. As I was asked to review some of the additional service items that we could provide to a student, or I'm sorry, our employees. And one of the first items that we were asked to consider was the 457 additional deferred compensation plan. This is just a section of the code of the Internal Revenue Code. You have 403Bs that are offered currently to the employees. We were asked to review and consider adding the 457 as part of the retirement package for employees to be able to set aside additional funds so that when they retire, they would reach the maximum contribution amounts. So when we were asked to explore the advantages and disadvantages, we started looking at the first part. The advantages of this was that it does have a better investment options. You get to actually invest in higher rated stock mutual funds and stock options. There is a retirement education program attached to those programs as well. The IRS, you have no 10% early penalty withdrawal for individuals who withdraw money prior to age 59 and a half. And typically there is no surrender schedule attached to that program. So it's a very, very impressive deferred compensation plan. And it's utilized in a majority of school districts and public entities across the state. The disadvantages, well, we were looking for the disadvantages and we had a difficult time trying to find them. Typically, we said the downside is you may lose some money in the stock market. That's typical, and you can't create a guaranteed income out of it. You would have to transfer it into a guaranteed program so you could create a guaranteed income as you retire. There is no in-service withdrawals, so that wasn't a big deal killer, if I can call it that. What we did find was that you do have two advantages in this program. With the 403B and the 457 in combination in the same calendar year, an individual may be able to set aside $19,500 in each of the programs, so up to almost $40,000 of their compensation can be set aside for retirement in one given year. In addition to that, they also have a catch-up provision. So if they started off late and they want to catch up past age 50, they're able to increase the amount of contributions to each of those programs. So they're great, great programs. If adding that as part of your retirement program, you can add it to the 403B by resolution. We can solicit proposals. There's any option, but you will have to adopt it if you decide to do that. You have to adopt it as one of your retirement options. You'll have to put you have to get a plan document as well. And then your plan administrator will administer the contribution amounts to ensure that they're approved by the mutual fund companies. Any questions? It's a very simple program, by the way. It was difficult to find, like I keep saying, it's difficult to find something that is not in the best interest of the employees.
Roger, this is Andrew. How are you?
Good afternoon, Mr. Gonzalez. How are you?
Fine. Roger, quick question though. Now on the 457 and the 403B, it's up to the employee's discretion on who they want to use as their agents, right?
You do have a selected group, and under the 403B, your vendors are pre-selected by TRS. So there is a handful of agents that participate in these programs in your district as well. So yes, to answer your question, yes, it is.
Thank you. I just wanted to verify. I don't want, if this is something that we do down the road, I know this is just for discussion purposes right now, that the teachers or administrative staff know that it's on them whether or not they want to provide to a 403B or a 457.
Exactly. There's more advantages on a 457 because it does a lot more aggressive investments than a 403B, which are very, very structured. But the good news is you can participate in both.
Okay. Coach Cuellar, any questions on this? Are you muted, Coach?
I'm not going to comment on this right now because my mind's on other things that are important. And if anything, you know, you said that staff has been asking about this.
Correct. Some staff members had asked, and so that's why it's on the workshop today.
Yeah, and this is something that's voluntary, right? Something that they want, if they want it, that they can get.
Correct.
It is. It's correct. They can contribute to the 403B or the 457, or they may make no contributions at all.
But it's choice, right?
Yes, sir. It's by choice. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Okay. Any other comments by any other board members?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Lopez.
Roger, on this is all sort of kind of French to me, but I know that in my company I have some insurance that we can add our family. Is this a possibility for an insured to add his family, kids, and stuff like that?
No, sir. Not on the 403B or the 457. These are, in generic terms, they're your 401ks, your retirement programs. They're all codes, so they're IRS codes. In this particular case, the 457 is a deferred compensation program. It was designed to defer income to a later date. It's used primarily for a lot of the teachers that are getting into the higher income and retirement part of their careers. They utilize these plans a lot.
Will you be offering that other product also?
Sir?
Will you be offering that other product also? Or as far as
the 403B, yes, sir. The 403B is a sister to the 457. Mr. Lopez, I can't hear you, sir.
Will they be able to add families and loved ones to that one?
No, sir. No, it's only for the employed individual that's employed by the political subdivision.
Will you be offering something that our employees, since it is voluntary, and if they want to add a loved one, will you be offering something that provides that?
Well, the law doesn't allow you to do that. This is an IRS program or statute, if I may say it. It's only for the income that's derived from a school district or a public library or a church. But it's specifically targeting only these individuals. But you cannot add a family member, a spouse, or a child to your retirement program. It eschews the age at retirement or the amount that you get back.
Tonight, will you be offering anything like that, or in the discussion in the workshop, or you're not talking about that?
Not on this subject here, because this is only specifically employee only. Okay.
Any other questions by any other board member? Now, Mr. Lopez, you were asking on, I guess, on voluntary insurance products, not necessarily these two?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the one.
Okay. Dr. Canales, anything else here on this?
Mr. Nieto, one question real quick. I left for a minute.
Yes,
So,
sir.
Was there discussion on the whole life plan insurance?
No, sir. That's what I think Mr. Lopez was asking on voluntary insurance products.
Okay, and that's not on the voluntary products for staff to select?
For that,
There-
yes.
There's a,
It's on. So this just had to do with the 457. This is probably some of the questions that were being asked about the next topic that Mr. Garza is going to present.
Okay,
Yeah, this is a product, what Mr. Lopez was asking about, and yourself, Dr. Rivera. So, Roger, will you continue on this one?
yes, sir. And again, we were asked Friday to explore the advantages and disadvantages of offering the employees an opportunity to purchase interest-sensitive whole life insurance through the district's purchasing pool. So they asked that I explore once again the advantages of this type of program. So what we did, we're doing a very mutual balancing here. These are not my quotes, but these are just quotes that are basically part of this program. One of the advantages of this program has a tax-deferred growth and a tax-free withdrawals. It's a life insurance policy. That's what it is. The interest rates are basically set aside by the company's performance in the mutual fund programs. They put your money in mutual fund programs, so there's a volatility on your investment. If they put it in poorly producing funds, your life insurance will produce poor returns. So there's limitations on what you can do there in that area. It does offer an immediate death benefit. You purchase the program at the attained age. So if you're 25, you pay the premium for a 25-year-old. If you're 45, you pay 45, and it stays that way. It is portable. That's one thing that it does offer, portability. You can take it anywhere you want. It belongs to you. Those were the advantages we found. I'm sure there's probably 100 other ones that you can add to the list off and on, but for the most part, this is probably the highlights. So then when we went back and explored the disadvantages, we had this discussion with staff, and we went back and forth, and we found that in the areas where we've been asked to consider the advantages of an interest-sensitive whole life policy in the school district, the difficult part is how to evaluate them from one to the other. Internally, in a policy, you have the cost of insurance. Okay, so if you look at it from a dollar standpoint, there's a certain percentage of that dollar that's applied to the cost of insurance. The rest of it is mortality and morbidity factors. You also have the cost of operations, investment factors, impossible losses as well. They're all inside that $1. Those charges, those insurance charges, change on a daily and monthly and quarterly period. So what might be a very great purchase opportunity on Monday may result in a horrible decision on Friday. So that's one of the disadvantages of making that selection. There's also high penalties for early withdrawals or loss of initial investment. So if an employee decides he doesn't want the program after 5 years, he's lost all his money. But he gets to keep the life insurance if he wants to keep it. But as I have always learned in 40 years of this, life insurance is not something that you buy. Life insurance is something that is sold. So it's not something that people stand in line to go get. It's also the other disadvantage was it's individually underwritten. So if you have a program that you're going to offer, particularly in this environment that we're in, it's something that people are going to have to either have to get the medical records if they exceed a certain amount, or they're going to be subject to a medical exam. The next item that we found was the policyholder must maintain a minimum monthly contribution or premium in order to keep the policy from lapsing. If you notice bullet point number 1, the cost of insurance or the charges on that policy are going to be increasing along with your interest rates. So there's going to be some crossroads where you're going to have to make higher contributions in the future. The other item that we found is difficult to regulate. In the school districts that we asked, they found that there was always complaints of unauthorized replacement, and we call it churning. That's what it is. And what it is they talk people into either changing their coverage, increasing their coverage, decreasing their coverage, or changing the type of policy that they have, making a loss of initial investments or the loss of time periods reflecting on what they're doing. So typically you would take a 45-year-old that's had a policy for 5 years and you start them all over at age 50. So there was a lot of churning is one of the chief complaints that we had. And it's difficult to control because there is no monitoring of what they're doing individually inside the program because we don't have that control. If we had control, then I could possibly say something different, but it's hard. It's just very difficult. The last item that we have is the whole harmless identification may not apply in your case. This is one of the items that I would defer over to Mr. Perez, Ivan Perez, because if in the event there's a form of misrepresentation, a loss of revenue or loss of income in these particular programs, the individual who purchased the policy may hold the district accountable for the loss that he suffered. So unless it can get an identification sign, or be subject to indemnification, hold harmless, it would be something that Mr. Perez would have to identify as we move forward. Last but not least, this is my quote. It's an individually underwritten life insurance policy. It doesn't have a no loss, no gain provision. It should be purchased by the policy owner on his own. Providing access within the purchasing portals of a tax-exempt entity is not recommended at this time.
Mr. Lopez or Dr. Jaime, any questions on?
Mr. Garza, question: is there not a whole life policy that would not involve mutual funds and investments? Just a strict, say an employee would want to purchase $25,000 in a whole plan just to keep it in case they retire or they separate from the district, something that wouldn't involve investments, mutual funds.
Sure. Yeah, there are whole life policies out there that can actually be offered. Again, those would be something that we would certainly take into consideration. And those are probably, if you're going to move one way or the other, those are probably the only ones that you should look at. The interest sensitive, you have to keep them in check in their own balance. But if you're going to do a whole life policy, keep in mind the cost of insurance. It's always, they're very high. So for a 50-year-old, a 55-year-old, buying whole life insurance at that age is going to be almost astronomical, particularly if you're having to insure $50 or $60 or $100,000 in face amount.
Well, I mean, I think this would be something that maybe, say a younger employee that could take advantage of. I know here at my practice, we offer that to our employees and really, I mean, it's an optional program. It's really up to our employees if they want to take advantage of that or not. But
absolutely.
But that's something that I think, I've been asked about, as in regards to life insurance that they can keep once they retire or they no longer work for the district.
Yes, sir. You'd have to set out the parameters first so that, because you do have 9 large insurance carriers that actually offer that type of program. But once you set the parameters in place, the cost of insurance, what your mortality, morbidity figures are going to be, so you can properly evaluate it. The last thing you want to do is offer someone something that, could possibly be cheaper if they had made a different decision, or we've made a different decision, because we actually would be making the decision in their behalf, and they would be paying the premium. And that's what the difficult part is there's some people that want to buy more, some people that don't want to buy as much. So there's a fluctuation in the purchase levels. So you either have to set the minimum and the maximum, and you have to set the parameters in between. So there is no replacement, and there is either a guaranteed portal someplace, because you can't have individuals taking medical exams in a school district.
Mr. Lopez?
Can it be done, Roger?
Can it be done? Anything is possible. We can write the portals for it. Timing is of the essence, but you know, it can be done. Anything can be done.
I'd like to be able to offer that to our employees. Now, is this what I was asking about? Because I have a third insurance at my company also, where my employees and their family. Would that be the case on this whole life?
You can, on one policy and a whole life policy, you can add a child rider, you can add a family rider, but you can't add a separate individual to the policy unless you're buying an exchange or a policy for one another to cancel one and the other.
But you can insure them under the employee's name. Is that correct?
You can do it under the employee's name, under the family rider, yes, sir.
Okay. I like that because I was able to do that, and we've, unfortunately, some of my employees and their families have been able to use that, and it's not that it's a good thing, but it's something that was there for them in a time of crisis. And it's something that I would like our employees here at WISD to have access to. They don't have to buy it, but they would have access to it. That would be a good thing for all of our families, and hopefully nobody ever goes through any tragedies or any hard times. But we sometimes times are hard, and we don't know what's going to happen.
Again, the most difficult part is setting the parameters of how you're going to establish what the minimum base is and the maximum offered. What you don't want to become is the insurance source for a selected insurance company, because remember, once they check in, they can't check out, because everything is a loss after that. So if there's some considerations that I would offer the board to take into consideration first, if they decide to take that route, is make sure we understand what we're getting into, because employees won't be able to, they'll be able to cancel the policies, but they'll never be able to change carriers again.
Roger, but isn't all insurance the same way? If you don't pay and you get out, you lose.
No, yes, no, I absolutely agree with you. You're absolutely right, except the individual makes that choice. We're making the choice of where they're going to purchase it, and only from that one company, whether it's ABC or XYZ company. We're making the choice that we will support it here under this system. But once they buy it, once they make the first dollar exchange, there's a strong possibility that they'll never be able to change again, because they'll lose their investment. So that's why the challenge is, we want to make sure that you, as a board, interview the companies and the carriers and the agents.
Roger, you're saying you're talking very scary, scaring a lot of people off, I would think.
I don't know.
But I mean, you're saying if they get there, they're locked in, and I understand you're locked into that insurance, but at the same time, they can still go out and buy other insurance from other companies.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I apologize. I didn't mean to put it that way. What I was trying to convey was that once you purchase, that's what we make. We select. I'm going to use New World Life Insurance Company as our whole life carrier. So 10 years from now or 15 years from now, new whole life company is still going to be there, because the people that were 25 years old will now be 45 years old, and they'll have that coverage. So if they choose, and just an example, a new board chooses XYZ company to be the new insurance carrier, New World Life is still going to be there, and here comes another company selling whole life insurance again. So what I want to caution is that these people that are now 45 and 50 years old, they've had that coverage for 15 years, that they understand that they won't be able to join this new company because they'll lose their money. So
they want to have more insurance, right?
right, they can buy more, but they have to be under the extreme caution that any surrender amount, it's going to be charged against them, and they're going to lose their investment. So I want the board to know that it's going to be their decision, your decision, to select the company and the agent. Now, we'll make the evaluation for you. We'll give you the pointers, but y'all do that, because 20 years down the road, it's going to be somebody asking who selected this company. And that's what we see today when we've run into entities that pop up and say, well, how did we select this company? Sometimes we don't know because we weren't there. But, you know.
Let me ask this. Right now, at present time, does WISD offer whole life insurance?
No, sir.
Do other districts in our region offer whole life insurance?
Some do, yes.
Can you give me some names of who, or do you know off the top of your head?
Well, I know that Chelsea does. I know that McAllen ISD does. And for the most part, Edinburgh CISD does. No, there's not a whole lot of I guess, sales, but you know, there's not a whole lot of participation, but they're there.
Well, you know, I, for one, and Dr. Canales and Mr. President, I'm in support of this. I offer this in my business, and I don't know where we have to go or what we have to do to offer to our employees, but I think it's a good thing if they can add their loved ones. I mean, what's wrong with that? I mean, I know it's probably going to create extra work for the office, but I feel that it's helped up my employees in the past, and unfortunately and fortunately at the same time. Go ahead, Andrew.
Mr. Andrew Gonzalez?
Yeah, so I'm a little confused. I don't know as far as why we brought this item to the board today. But what I do know is this. We do provide term insurance, correct, Roger? To our employees.
That's correct, yes, sir. We do.
On these life policies, Roger, 18 is the end of the child rider, or is it 26?
It's 21, actually.
Okay.
No, it's 21.
Okay, so we're already offering the life on the term side as long as they're employees. And I feel that most of our staff would go to either their home and auto provider because they as well sell this type of product. For us to bring it in to the district, I just don't see how, unless we already know of an agent that we're going to use or a product already in mind. I just don't see why they wouldn't go to their home and auto agent, who probably for the most part sells a universal life, a whole life, a term life, all these other different types of policies. Basically what I do for a living as well. But to pick one agent out or to pick one company out and maybe get in trouble down the road, that is what's concerning to me. Now, is life insurance good? I think it's great. Is it for everybody? Unfortunately, some can't afford the cost of a permanent policy like a whole life or universal life when you get it later on in life. Again, whatever the board wants to do, it's fine. You know, there are advantages and there are disadvantages. I just don't see how we're bringing this when we got pressing matters as to how we're going to get our kids to school. So again, Roger, I appreciate the time you took to do all of this. And again, you know, I know this is just a workshop and we're just discussing it. But I think we have more pressing matters than this at this point in time. Again, thank you, Roger.
No, thank you very much. Like I said, I did the analysis, and it's up to the board to do, to just give me direction or give the staff direction.
Okay, good discussion for all the board members on this. Mr. Lopez, you had a final comment?
I would like to offer to employees for a simple reason they can have their students, and some people, yes, some will buy their car insurance and run out as soon as they can. This is something that's being offered that they can pick up at school, and I think it's a good thing to offer them, all our employees.
And again, like Mr. Garza mentioned, there's certain parameters that we gotta abide by, so that way, whatever the board decides in the near future, like Mr. Gonzalez said, this is a workshop, and then we can ask Roger to bring in some information for another actual workshop, and then make a decision if the majority of the board members are in agreement. Okay, Mr. Garza?
Yes, sir. Just like I said, as long as I give directions, we'll put it together.
Okay, so it is 6:50. You don't have to log off and adjourn this workshop. Any final comments? All right, so we'll continue on with the special board meeting. Good evening, I'm Isidoro Nieto, President of the Weslaco ISD Board of Trustees. On March 16, 2020, Governor Abbott granted a request by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton to temporarily suspend certain open meeting law requirements to the extent necessary to allow telephonic and video conference meetings in response to COVID-19. In accordance with the law, notice of this meeting of the Board of Weslaco Independent School District has been posted online for at least 72 hours. Although members of the board are not gathered in a central physical location, there will be a quorum in attendance at this meeting by video conference or telephone call. The board is meeting by the use of Google Meets and telephone transmission, which allows two-way communication for members of the public during public comments. The live audio of this meeting is being broadcast live and online. As we would at any in-person meeting, members of the public who have followed the instructions on the meeting notice for speaking during the public comment portion will be called at the telephone number they have provided to speak up to 5 minutes. All other meeting procedures will adhere to board adopted procedures to the extent possible. A recording of this meeting is being made and will be available to the public at a later date. We apologize in advance for any unforeseeable difficulties and ask for your patience as we navigate these conditions. The time is now 6:52, and I call the special board meeting to order. I will now call the name of each board member who will acknowledge their presence by stating here. Mr. Lopez.
I'm here.
Dr. Richard Rivera.
Here.
Mr. Patrick Kennedy.
Present.
Dr. Jaime Rodriguez.
Here.
Mr. Andrew Gonzalez.
Here.
Coach Armando Cuellar.
Here.
And myself. And let the minutes reflect that I am also present. Let the record show that a quorum of board members are in attendance. We don't have any public comments today. Item number 4, discussion of possible action for the board to consider approval to purchase additional internet hotspots to be used by students for online learning. Dr. Canales.
Board of Trustees, first of all, thank you for supporting remote learning and technology access for all students. On July 6, 2020, you approved initial purchase of 700 internet hotspots for students. On August 3rd, 2020, you approved an additional up to 1,500 additional hotspots. And those have been ordered, and we even had more deliveries today. The hotspots that we've been ordering have unlimited data with filtered internet access on a 12-month subscription. So we are ordering from T-Mobile. We did survey our parents as part of the registration process. We did have a preliminary indication of the number of hotspots that were needed to make sure that our children are receiving the benefits of remote learning. And we have more information thanks to a team across the district who has been looking at the needs. That includes Mr. Martinez, Mrs. Peterson, Mr. Aguilar, Mr. Amdal, Dr. Cantu, and Mr. Sanchez. We have determined that we need additional 1,500 as we work on lever recoveries, as we look at the Gear Up grant cohort, the incoming freshmen, as we look at the Sprint grant that has been secured over the last couple of years. So we're asking for the Board of Trustees to approve up to 1,500. Up to 1,500, but the approval will include 500 additional if needed. Mr. Sanchez and I tomorrow are reviewing. We did receive notification that our district is getting some hotspots from the Texas Education Agency. We have scheduled a meeting with TA tomorrow to look at what's coming to us and if whether we can, not like let's make a deal, but if well, I'm just still laughing. Maybe it is like, let's make a deal. But we're going to order this, but they'll reimburse us from it. So we're going to try tomorrow. But in the meantime, we do need additional hotspots. The total cost for the 1,500 is $360,000. And the funding for the second additional 1,500 hotspots orders will be obtained from Function 11 budget, initially earmarked for the one-time incentive payment for employees as part of the 2020-2021 budget, which has implications that Mr. Sanchez can explain.
Good evening. Do you have any questions on what we set up here on the hotspots?
Andres, it's needed. It
Yes, sir.
certainly is. But I kind of missed, how are we paying for this? What fund?
The local funds. You'll remember when I was presenting on the budget, we had an amount that I said we can use these to pay a one-time payment to staff, which the board changed to a larger amount. So that amount's still there. And so I would take the money from Function 11 from there to buy these hotspots. Or I would have to take the money from fund balance anyway.
So it's not part of the stipend. You're not going to reduce stipends for staff.
No, that's not reduced because we don't have money for that, enough money for all the one payment anyway. So we're going to take it from fund balance. So right now we can take it from that amount. We can amend the fund balance, the budget later to include from fund balance.
Because it is really needed, so I'll make the motion to approve.
I have a clarification.
I have a motion.
And the motion is to include up to
Up to
2,000.
2,000. Up to
Right.
2,000.
Up to 2,000 hotspots, you said?
Yes.
Okay. So I have a motion by Dr. Vera. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion by Dr. Vera and a second by Dr. Jaime, correct?
Yes, sir.
To consider approval or to approve purchase additional internet hotspots to be used by students for online learning, which is 2,000 of them, correct, Andres?
Yes, sir.
All right. Any discussion?
I lost my audio when y'all were discussing, so I saw lips moving, but I did not hear a thing. How much money are we talking about, Doc?
We're talking, it's up to 2,000, and we're talking $360,000.
The 360,000 is for the initial purchase of 1,500. If we were to buy the whole 2,000, it would be 480,000.
Let me ask this. I think I heard y'all say that somebody's monitoring these and make sure that they're working properly and providing good service. I'd hate to say, well, they're not working too good, but we're going to get some more.
No, the technology department is working on it.
Actually, Mr. Lopez, remember when, who was it that was actually using a hotspot for one of the meetings, one of the technology personnel that at home, they were using it to test it out and it was operable?
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
If I may make a comment, Mr. Lopez, as part of the committee working with the administrator that Dr. Canales mentioned, we also have Ms. Renee Dyer, Ms. Elva Calvillo, and they're checking on all the hotspots. Some of the ones that were having trouble, some of the older hotspots from the grant we had, they're limited access. So we had to replace some of those. We're replacing 700 of those with this addition.
Yeah. Now, let's just say 2 months from now, all of this is COVID is in the past. All our kids are back in school. Are we going to have 3,000 hotspots in storage, or what is the plan after that?
Our students can continue using them for homework, That was one of the problems when I have internet at home, do the homework and get online access. Even a high school students will have to be doing work in school and work at home, so they will continue to use it.
Okay. All right. That takes care of that. That's a good idea.
All right, so we have a motion by Dr. Rivera, second by Dr. Jaime. Please say aye when I call your name. Mr. Kennedy,
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Aye.
Dr. Jaime,
Aye.
Dr. Rivera.
Aye, and I just want to say that technology will continue in the future. We're in a different ballgame now, and we're never going back to the way it used to be. So technology now is very, very important.
Very true.
We're not going back.
Yes, sir.
Aye,
Mr.
yes,
Lopez?
aye.
Okay. Mr.
Aye.
Lopez?
Aye.
Coach Cuellar?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Good decision on purchasing the hotspots that are well needed, and of course will be needed in the future, like Dr. Rivera mentioned. So very important for our students and our staff to have additional hotspots for this coming year and for the future.
Thank you.
All right,
Mr.
adjournment?
Mr. Nieto,
Yes, sir.
one last thing.
Okay.
I brought this up before, but were the people that were on waiting lists, have they been taken care of already, or do we still have people on waiting lists?
We still have some students on the waiting list, Mr. Cuellar. We received 500 hotspots today. We'll get 200 more on either Friday or Monday, and that's what we're buying more because we have some students that still need them. Mr. Aguilar can provide more information if needed.
Very good question, Coach Cuellar. We're closely monitoring that with the 500 that just came in today. Those were distributed, so that took that initial count. So what we had projected was roughly about 1,500. That included the students that had very limited bandwidth and speed. So that should take care of us. But with the additional up to 2,000 that were approved, that should take care of our needs at this point that the board approved.
Okay,
So
well, there's no question that we need those, but those that haven't had access to it, what are we doing to service them so that they don't fall that far behind the others that have had it?
Yes, sir. So currently right now, our principals are working with them with a plan that is going to be equitable to the same thing that we're doing asynchronously and synchronously with paper packet alternatives. So we can monitor engagement with the families. Parents, teachers are reaching out to parents to work with them over the phone, working with students, making that contact, communicating with them, as best as we can. Our goal is to continue that engagement piece and offer support and services as best as we can.
Okay, well, just because if they're not being serviced or they're not getting, if we don't have no way to account for their attendance, then, we don't want to miss out on that.
Yes, sir.
Good point.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. And of course, good decisions. Adjournment.
So move.
All right.
Good evening.
7:03, and we adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe.